you can see the corruption, how far it's been going. Taxpayers' money funding their enemies.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to The Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. Very, very enthused I am right now to get into the show because I've got the main man beside me, the grand poobah, as it were. So I do these things because I love to distract you, but not in the way that Mr. Carter would, okay? I like to have some level of respect.
I'm used to hearing my 6-year-olds and all that talk about poo a lot and laugh about it, but I've never thought it was coming from you.
Oh, poobah, it's a whole different thing. It's got a Fred Flintstone vibe. Of course, the gentleman I'm talking about is Derek Whittaker from Blu Sky Factory. Great pleasure to have you on, mate. And we're sitting up here nice and close. We may have some guests pop in later, depending on time. And, well, when are we talking about time? Geez, we've got a lot to fit in today.
There is a lot. There's a lot been going on. And, you know, I'm doing a presentation tonight with some of my students and my clients. And it's kind of weird. You know, you think Easter's happened, Anzac Day's happened, and you kind of go, well, maybe not much has happened. And then you actually dive in and look at what's going on.
I don't know, mate.
It's like 6 months worth of material is like there in a week and a half. You're like,
completely agree.
Far out. We are in accelerated times. We really are. And we're starting to get a little bit of clarity as far as the whole conflict in Europe is concerned, how it's pan out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard this on mainstream media, but the US and Ukraine have signed a deal.
No. Okay, here's the thing. You won't hear that on mainstream media. They will do everything to bury it, let's face it. So this is huge. This should be starting every news bulletin right now. But hey, alas, it's not. So,
of course, we've got the $175 billion money that was donated or given to, well, it's arguable. If you were Zelensky, he was arguing that it was a donation.
It was a gift. Yeah, just a special gift.
If you're the current administration, you're saying no, it was not. $175 billion US, aiding, of course, Ukraine since the beginning of its conflict with Russia. And now US and Kyiv have signed an agreement to share profits and royalties from the future sale of Ukrainian minerals and rare earths, sealing a deal that Donald Trump has said will provide an economic incentive for the US to continue to invest in Ukraine's defense and its reconstruction after he brokers a peace deal with Russia. Now, let's look at the American perspective from this for a moment. Let's do that. Trump has been wanting rare earth minerals, which have been sourced from China for a long, long time. Now, with, of course, the argy-bargy tariff wars with China at the moment, you'd expect that, well, China's not going to be so agreeable in handing those over or letting the US buy them at a reasonable price. Of course, you're seeing all these real estate proposals go on from the Trump administration. You know, there's Greenland. Yes. It needs security. Well, there's rare earths in Greenland. There was a deal that we talked about last week. It happened in Africa. Was it the Congo?
That's right.
Yeah. So this is now another part of it where the United States is saying, okay, we gave you all this money for your conflict and you need to start paying the bill now.
Well, they do need to start paying the bill. And this is the thing, when we talk about these rare earths and rare metals and so forth, you have to pay your way. We could also talk about the fact that, if I was a Ukrainian, I'd be pretty upset that this deal wasn't done a long time ago, because a lot of men and women have lost their lives over the last few years that could have been avoided. This is all obviously
the US
is
saying that 2,500 people die each week this conflict goes on. That can be either side, Russian or Ukrainian, okay?
They're human beings, doesn't matter what side they're on.
Exactly. And I know there's always two sides to a conflict. And Trump's been trying to get this deal going so the bloodshed stops. This is now called the U.S.-Ukrainian Reconstruction Investment Fund that is supposed to repay an estimated $175 billion. It signals to Russia that, and some are saying, Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, is saying agreement signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term.
Now, who said that?
The Treasury of the US, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. President Trump envisioned this partnership between the US people and the Ukrainian people to show both sides' commitment to lasting peace and prosperity in Ukraine. To be clear, no state or person who financed or supplied the Russian war machine will be allowed to benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. So
I like that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, because that's the big concern with a lot of these kind of deals, is that it's just money that goes into the bureaucrats'
It's more.
pockets.
I mean, let's cut the crap. Ukraine for a very, very long long time has been the money laundering center of the earth. Okay, this is where they've laundered so much. So this is not new. Certainly they've got the infrastructure for it.
If we put up the first slide here, Aaron, it's going to show just how rich the mineral supply is in Ukraine, and you're going to get a perspective there as to what kind of resources, mineral resources, they're sitting on. There's obviously in the orange there the rare earths that we've alluded to, but they're also sitting on beryllium, graphite, iron, lithium, manganese, non-ferrous metal, polymetallic, titanium, zirconium, and uranium. So they've got quite a lot of resources that extend down there, right down to Crimea, as you can see.
Yeah, okay.
And it's very, very rich earth. And so that's what the United States are saying. Look, you guys have got this debt, but it's not all we're going to take it all from you. It's kind of like they're keeping a percentage of it as well.
Sure.
Which helps rebuild a nation. And that's so critical. If we've learned anything from wartime experiences, the deal that Germany had coming out of World War I was the reason we had World War II.
Exactly right.
And that treaty, I can't think of the name of it, the Versailles Treaty, I think it was called.
Yes,
the Treaty of Versailles.
Yes.
Was a deal that it was just rubbing the defeated noses.
But they're nosing it. Absolutely. Exactly.
And of course, that was the rise, of course, so much nationalism that happened leading up to the Second World War that Hitler was able to do. And of course, America, we rebuilt Japan at the end of the Second World War to ensure that didn't happen. Germany became very prosperous, especially the West. Forgetting about the Cold War for a moment, but the West Germany became very prosperous after Second World War.
I mean, you think of big economies afterwards: US, Japan, and absolutely the west of Germany. These were the countries that theoretically, if you look at say Japan, you look at Western Europe, Germany. These are the two countries that should have been theoretically starting from a much behind the eight ball, basically. Yeah.
There's always two sides to it. The critics of the deal say that the White House is seeking to take advantage of Ukraine by linking future aid to the embattled nation to give away by revenues from its resources. There's always those kind of other sides of it. But look, it's better than bloodshed. And it's giving them opportunity to rebuild their nation and also build wealth. So, that's not a bad thing. It's interesting where you go for here with Russia because, of course, the United States has had similar conversations with the Russians saying, you've got rare earths. We're happy to build in infrastructure in very remote places. You can imagine with Russia, getting to those
Siberia,
places,
there we go.
It's not easy.
Hospitable.
And they're talking those on that level. So, this sounds like hopefully a win-win for everyone coming out of a very messy conflict.
Look, I think so. I mean, look, he's a businessman. Trump is a businessman. He's going to come up with a deal that is primarily, about business, but he does obviously care about people. And if you do look at the end of, say, World War II, there were a lot of companies, American companies specifically, who did ridiculously, and I would say not ethically well, out of the rebuilding of these countries. So I think the balance and common sense has got to come out of it. You've got to put the people first, and they need to pay that debt, but they also need to rebuild their country.
The question then will come up, right, if America's getting that much out of Ukraine, what happens to all the other nations who gave to Ukraine during this conflict and funding the war, and Australian taxpayers as well? I think a lot of that's going to come down to political issues. Of course, the Australian government has been very supporting Ukraine, whereas the new administration of the United States is like, let's just end the conflict. We don't care who's right, who's wrong. Let's end the bloodshed.
These are human beings, okay? It doesn't matter what their flag is. I see the flag everywhere for Ukraine, and normally people are going to be a bit harsh here, but who put the flag up on their social media, or even some people who put them up in their yards, these are generally people who aren't actually educated on the truth, right? These are people who are educated on propaganda, watched on television. End of the day, whether you're Ukrainian, you're Russian, you're whoever, that this is human beings. These are these are the sons and sometimes the daughters of everyday people, and we should care about them. There's got to be that ethics to it.
Yeah, we're talking fathers, we're talking brothers.
We are.
We're talking sons. So, and that's absolutely true. So this is really fascinating how this is playing out.
Okay.
And watch that space as that. Hopefully that is signaling an end to the conflict. Of course, then you had Zelensky on the weekend talking about how they're having celebrations on Victory Day in Russia. And he says, I cannot guarantee everyone's safety who attends there. And you're going, well, what are you saying? Read between the lines there. Yep. It's an interesting one, and how to allow these individuals to step down, not lose face. But honestly, I mean,
Look, they're going to lose a little face.
They're
There's
going to
no
lose
way.
more. The problem with Zelensky is he's probably going to lose a lot more than just a little face.
Oh, he's going to disappear off to a nice little island with billions of dollars. He'll be fine. I have no worries about him.
You think?
Well, unless he has an accident. Who knows? All right. I think we've got some next video that I was going to bring up.
Well,
have I jumped the gun a little bit?
No, yeah, it's fine. Let's get into that. This is to be clear for where people stand. I think this is a great little video that Vance put out some time ago, really stating U.S. economic policy here and where it's going. So if you had any doubts or you didn't quite understand what's the motivation between all the tariffs and all this stuff, this video puts it very, very succinctly. Take a look.
Clear about his plan, about our administration's plan. Our goal is to make it easier and more affordable to make things again in the United States of America. If you invest in America, in American jobs, in American workers, and in American businesses, you're going to be rewarded. We're going to cut your taxes. We're going to slash regulations, and we're going to reduce the cost of energy to build things right here in this country that all of us love. But if you try to undercut us and build outside of our borders, the President Trump's administration has got nothing for you. If you want to be rewarded, build in America. If you want to be penalized, build outside of America. It's as simple as that.
Any questions?
Look, people need jobs, right? And you've got to bring the manufacturing back to the country. And, obviously we're talking about America here. And, over the weekend we've had this, I tell you right now, I've been approached by more people over the weekend than, I don't know, if I was giving out free KFC at Fat Camp, right? Like, honestly, so many people have contacted me about the election here. And looking at the next 3 years of a weak government. Look at the strength of that government. Okay, look at what's going on. Whether you like Trump, Vance, whatever your feelings are here, the fact of the matter is they are genuinely trying to put jobs, Americans in employment again. Now, we have no manufacturing sector here in Australia pretty much anymore. It would be very, very good to see that sort of level of
very
strength.
agricultural based as far as our relations to the US. They import beef from us. That's the big thing. Mining, obviously. But I'm hearing you.
Yeah. I by that, when I see the video from Vance, I'm inspired by the fact that you actually want to get people back in your country back to work again.
We do education. We do a lot in education in Australia as well.
Yeah, true.
Foreign students coming over here. I think it was interesting to listen to the Prime Minister's speech at the end of the weekend on Saturday. I didn't watch a lot of it. I've got to be frank with you, but it was hearing one thing. Australia has indicated that we have our own way of self-determination. Is basically what he said, without saying, "Hey, we're not going to go the American way." That's basically what he's saying. If you read between the lines, that's how it came across to me. The reality is, you are not going to be able to ignore the United States on the political scene. You can try and create that. But that's what's going to happen. We've got Shaquille. Shaquille's wanting to get in. That'd be great to have him.
So let's bring Shaq in. Hello, Mr. Shaq. How are we?
Not too shabby. Not too shabby.
Looking $1 million. We would love your opinions on what we're up to at the moment. Have you caught the show? Have you just I don't know, whizzed in off a jet at the moment?
Yeah, no, I did hear a little bit of it. Just so you know, I'll be over in Perth next. Well, I'm trying to get over there this weekend, so I'll be over there. So you might see me in the good old studio on Monday next week before I get away for my cousin's wedding. So yeah, I'll just make a couple of comments. Look, I think the US does have to be a little bit careful, but I really like the message. I like the message from JD Vance and Donald Trump about, if you want to build stuff in America, this administration's got something for you, and if you don't, you want to build somewhere else, we've got nothing for you. I thought that's a pretty powerful message. Certainly, they're trying to bring jobs back. Look, when JD Vance was first announced as the VP, I was really quite surprised. I think we all were a bit surprised. I didn't really think that he was the right person for the job, but that was mostly really because I didn't know that much about him. I think he stepped into that role really, really well. I think he totally owns. I think it's a great backup for Donald Trump. It's not like Pence. I think he's actually really proactive. Excuse me. Sorry. I think he's really proactive. So Yeah, look, I think that's great. As so far as our election is concerned, with Canada voting in the Liberals again, and Pierre Poilievre losing his own seat, I actually said to Joel Jamal and a few people here in Sydney, I said, that's what's going to happen here. And sure enough, it did. Now, I think the big difference with us is that the Liberal Party here really did a terrible job, and we've all made comments on it,
It was embarrassing.
for quite a long time now. It's a terrible job of campaigning that they did. I think one of the biggest issues that are facing centre-right political parties around the world is either you're going to be more Trumpian or you're not. Now, I think that in a lot of our countries, people are concerned about having the level of division that there is in the United States. The problem with that, though, is a lot of people are assuming that that division comes from the so-called MAGA crowd and the Trump crowd. I don't think that's the case at all. I think the United States has become increasingly more divided for quite a long time now, but it really became a lot more divided, I think, under Obama. So
I agree with that. Really do.
yeah, so I think that the idea that we don't want to take Trump style policies in our country is going to be too divided or too divisive. That I don't agree with that. As far as the Prime Minister's speech, when somebody went to boo and heckle Peter Dutton, he said, "No, don't do that. We treat each other with respect." Really, dude? Like, he opened up his speech with a, welcome to like an acknowledgement of, elders past and present after 60% of Australia said no to that. And you've lied and tried to besmirch Peter Dutton's reputation. Peter Dutton's never been an overly popular person, but it wasn't necessary to besmirch his reputation in the way that the Labor Party has and the media has. So I just thought it was a bit rich. It was a good speech in and of itself if you listen to the speech without any context of what had happened prior. But, he's going to go down as one of the Labor greats. Can you believe?
This just does my head in. So,
I mean, under the Gillard years, we had Wayne Swan, the world's greatest treasurer. And now we've got Albo, the Australia's greatest Labor leader. Heaven help me.
Yeah, Gillard was the worst prime minister this country's ever seen. Albo comes in and he's like, "Hold my beer." Like, honestly,
Yeah.
He has taken mismanagement, lies, propaganda, and gaslighting to a completely different level.
I take it you're a fan, Aaron.
But you know what? But again, like, because I've had a lot of people that have said to me, and somewhat in anger and frustration, I guess, who have said to me, what the hell is wrong with the Australian people, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to go down that path. I don't think it's a good idea to blame the electorate. I think that the Liberal Party, which is, I voted for independence, but I preference the Liberals first. It's not the fault of the Australian people. The Australian people are fed up, and the Liberal Party, our side of politics, did an abysmal job. That's the reality. And this should have been a referendum on Albo, and instead it's just been a, well, if you don't like Albo, how about we give you exactly the same thing, but we're wearing blue and they're wearing red?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's look at this comment at the bottom of the screen there from Deploy. Australian voters think the media is honest. There is the absolute key here.
And I want to add to that too, and a point that Shaquille referenced before about division that's happened in the Obama era. You've got to remember that social media algorithms kind of have had their part over that period of time where, honestly, they're sending you information that is of interest to you.
Yep.
I noticed that on Facebook today, I rarely go on Facebook, but lately I try to avoid it. But it was sending me certain leanings towards political influence and going, I'm hardly on this platform, and Facebook kind of knows what my political leanings are and not showing the other side. I'm going, this is interesting.
It is.
And again, it leads to the whole divisiveness of society, where you hear one side of the story but you're not hearing the other. We're not getting balanced reporting anymore.
No, we're not. Well, that's why I actually have multiple devices and different logins, so that I I have a fake lefty, and I have myself as I'm very proudly centre right.
Right.
Okay, used to be centre left.
So your profile picture, your purple hair in the one profile,
That's
and another
right.
one.
That's right.
Gotcha.
That's right. Yeah. The one that's listed by pronouns, you know which one that is, right? Oh, brilliant. All right. Shall we jump on to, now you've brought all some fantastic videos and pictures in.
I want to hear the next one from Trump. This is one of his plane interviews by the journalists. And this is kind of an indication where they're already seeing the effects of some of his policies. And I want to jump into that and then look at some really techie stuff as far as finance is concerned in a moment. You'll see where this is going.
Americans have more money. Inflation's dropping. Americans have more money, and the country has more money. You know, we've been making $2 and $3 billion a day the last couple of weeks. We didn't make that ever, and we're making a lot of money. And then, to be nice, I lowered the tariffs on everybody. But we've been making a lot of money, and it's always been the other way around. Other countries, in particular China, was making a lot of money.
It's interesting. I was with you on the campaign this time last year, and Americans were telling me they weren't planning to take a summer vacation because of inflation, gas prices, airline tickets. It's a different scenario now. What's your message to the American family when they buy those summer vacations this year?
Well, we have no inflation. We have lots of success. We have a lot of great things in the hope column. We hope it's going to be concluded, some of these things. We have a border that's totally sealed at a level that nobody's seen. Even during my 4 years, I was very successful with it, but I think we have it even a little more closed. We are allowing people into the country, but they have to come in legally. But I appreciate your question. Yeah, we have no inflation, and people are doing well.
And I think what that points out is a few things there. $2 or $3 billion a day is what he's claiming is coming in, with tariffs really only on China and everybody else who didn't retaliate against their tariffs got a 90-day break. That's a really interesting stat when you look at it.
It's a great point.
Measure that against and we'll get to this in a minute, but more on this later, what the savings that DOGE has been doing for the US. But people start to feel it when it comes to their holidays. Again, I remember a comment that Shaquille said a few months back, going back, about one of his neighbors having to save for his daughter's gymnastics. They wanted a leotard and they had to save for that leotard, and things have gotten to that point for many Australians. You can see this highlighted in this video where he's saying, look, they can go back on vacation now. They can afford a holiday because things are cheaper. Fuel prices are down. They can actually go from A to B. Oh,
look, back in the day, okay, your parents used to, let's go for a drive. Remember, that was a economical way for the family to get out there. You spend a couple of hours, maybe stop for ice cream. I mean, that's now get a second mortgage to fuel the car. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. And I think
it's interesting when you hear big media saying that there's all these Republicans that regret their vote. No, there's not. If you actually have a look at the stats, most people that voted for Donald Trump are pretty happy with the way things are going at the moment. There is obviously some concern about the extra volatility in the markets. But Donald Trump went to the electorate and actually said, this is what I'm planning on doing. It didn't come as a surprise. Now, what may have come as a surprise is how aggressive he's been about doing things. But remember, he's only got a couple of years before you've got those midterm elections. So he's got to come out and do them now. And I think, he wants it to work. And if it doesn't work, I'm sure that he'll very quickly take things in a different direction. But he's trying to do everything he can to make the United States a stronger country economically, to deal with their ridiculously high debt levels, etc. If I was an American Republican or an American Trump voter, I'd be pretty pleased with his efforts so far.
Let's have a look at the Consumer Price Index. This is an index that shows how things are going up or down. And they take household items and goods, and they kind of take an average as whether the cost of living is going up or down. This is for the United States. Let's take a quick look at this one. This is a 20-year kind of graph. You can see how things were down very low as far as 2019, just after 2019, around 2020, with the big crash that happened in the markets. And then under the Biden administration, it just skyrocketed to, what is that, about 7-8%, probably 8%, almost 9% there at the peak. And it's come down dramatically since the end of 2023, tapering out in 2024, and then going lower as far as 2024-25 is concerned. That's really interesting. And look, it lists all the items there, food at home, energy, electricity up the top there, apparel, medical care, shelter, education, communication, food away from home, gasoline or fuel, natural gas, commodities, less food, and new vehicles, etc. That's fascinating. Have a look at the next graph as well. This shows Australia's. It's not over at the same time frame.
Right.
The Australian one, it's a similar sort of pattern you'll see, which is really, really interesting. So this is from memory. This is, there you go, 2016. So really over the Trump era, when he came in just after he came in February, March. But this is an Australian one, of course, from the government website. You can see we actually went negative there in the September 2020 quarter. You can see
quite dramatically.
Very dramatically. And then, bam, it skyrockets up to almost 8%. So it hasn't been as dramatic as far as Australia is concerned in terms of its peaks in March 2023. But then again, look at that slide coming down. Now, a lot of that, of course, is global influences and the price of gasoline, moving transportation, moving goods around, all that sort of stuff has a flow-on effect. But I think, getting the fuel price down has been absolutely critical as far as inflation is concerned.
It's central to it. Let's face it. All of those other things we're talking about, food, for argument's sake, such a fundamental, right? We all need it. It's got to be transported. And guess what? The vehicles take petrol or diesel or fuel. That's what it comes down to. You lower the price of transport, you lower the price of everyday goods.
One of the things that's going to influence the Australian chart, obviously, will be housing. That's certainly gone up a lot, and the cost to build a home is increased as well. So that's going to be fascinating to watch as Australia tries to rebuild more houses for the huge population that population increases that we've had over the last 2 years. Play catch up, and of course, hopefully, they reduce our immigration as far as that's concerned. So,
look, no, we just signed our death warrant on Saturday. Australia said, let's bring in more immigration. Let's completely destroy supply and demand. That's what Australia said, right?
But you know what? I think that I've said this before, and I think it's something that does need to be acknowledged. If you're a homeowner, you want more immigration. That's just the reality right now, because we have a critical housing shortage. If you're everybody else, well, pray, because it's going to get a lot tougher. But I think that's also an aspect of why Albo might have gotten a bit more support, is because, one, you may as well embrace immigration, because Dutton turned around and said, yeah, you're not happy, well, we'll cut it by 25%, which still left us with a critical shortage. So, and I think as well that the issues facing us, as well as what's facing the United States and many countries in Europe, is we're not anti-immigrant countries, and I don't see the people on the right as being anti-immigrant. It's who is coming here. Are they going to assimilate into the country? And do they bring valuable skills, or have the potential to bring valuable skills, right? Somebody who comes here when they're 20 years old isn't going to be a skilled worker, but they can work up to that over their lifetime. What we don't want to see is people coming over here and we have to pay for their healthcare costs and the education, the housing and the shelter and this and that, while Australians that have lived here their whole lives are struggling and are living in bloody tents in Melbourne car parks.
I think I partly agree with you. I know that homeowners, Shaquille, want to have more immigration coming in until you have to go to emergency ward in a hospital or something like that, or you want to try to get your child into a school with better facilities. I think that's when you start feeling the pinch. These starting to get overcrowded, particularly on the hospital phase.
Oh, hospital phase. Okay, I am literally 18 months in to a 3-year wait for an operation. I live in pain every single day. I need an operation, right? And I have to wait 3 years if I'm lucky. The reality is it's far better for me to get on a plane, go to another country and actually pay for the operation. And let's face it, most of us don't have that option. You are right. It's great to see our house values going up because of immigration, but when our infrastructure cannot keep up, I'm sorry. And, I am pro-immigration. I'm pro-immigration as long as it is tempered and it is calculated and it's doing the best for, I
just want to be very clear. I'm not advocating for the level of immigration that we've had. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just simply pointing out that there would be a lot of Australians, especially wealthy Australians, who would say, hey, this is fantastic. I'm not saying that I'm advocating that position, but I'm saying this could be part of the reason. I think this is also part of the reason why you've seen the very wealthy parts of North Sydney, and Curtin again has gone to the Teals over in WA. I've got no home when I come back. So I think a lot of that has to do with the wealthy people looking out for themselves as opposed to looking out for what's in the best interest of the country.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, you got to think of that baby boomer generation. That a lot of them are sitting on a lot of wealth, right? They bought their houses when they were cheap. They're sitting on a lot of equity right now. But I think they're probably in the back of their minds thinking more about their health and access to health as opposed to how much their house value is going on. They're probably thinking, how can I help my kids out as well, get into their own home? That would probably be on the forefront of a lot of them.
I would like to think so. But I mean, ultimately, how can kids, standing here becoming an old man, but okay, how do those now who have left school, they're in their early 20s, the idea of owning a home is now a complete, it's a fallacy.
Well, it's your personal residence you're talking about. Travis has outlined the benefits of buying investment properties first.
Well, absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah. But the fact is, without wealthy parents, it's almost impossible to get into the property market, apart from that point that Travis has brought up.
Yeah, look at Travis's message there. But the messaging from the government messaging is that immigration is good and negative gearing is the cause of housing increases. No, yes. Travis, agree with you. No, it's not the cause of it. Negative gearing is provided so many houses for so many people, and who can do it better than the government can. I mean, let's talk about inefficiencies.
No.
The government will not manage houses and public housing better than a property investor will, because a property investor has got exactly vested interest in it.
Of course.
So,
Great comment also from
I'll just make a comment on sorry, before we get on to Deploy's comment, I'll just get on to just this negative gearing thing. I don't get this argument about negative gearing. I really don't. First of all, unless you're in very specific income brackets, negative gearing is fraught with danger. But more importantly, is that negative gearing rarely stays negatively geared, because negative gearing may happen for the first few years, but then as property prices increase and rental income increases, the only way that you can maintain negative gearing is if you actually go and purchase another property. Right.
Sure.
So if I was to buy one property today and I'm able to negative gear it today, the chances are that within a couple of years, that property will no longer be negative geared. Mm-hmm. So to get those tax savings, you have to buy more properties, which increases rental supply and puts downward pressure on rental prices. And you've only really got to look at the very wealthy areas. I'll talk mostly to our people here in Western Australia. As a percentage return, if you were to rent one of those big mansions in Dalkeith or South Perth or Cottesloe or whatever, you might only be paying like 1% of the value of that property in rent. Whereas if you rented in a more affordable area, you might actually be paying off the mortgage for that person.
You are.
The truth of the matter is that those blue ribbon properties, the people that are buying them as investments for capital growth don't get very much in rent in the meantime to maintain the thing. What do you want them to do? You want somebody to pay all this money in interest payments. The rent's not covering it and they don't get a tax deduction. And then you want to increase the amount they're going to pay in capital gains as well. And you're thinking that that's going to work. All that's going to happen is we're going to end up with Victorian rules, and you can see what's going on down there at the moment.
Yep, agreed.
So many great comments coming in, by the way, everyone. Really hard to keep up with them, really. The Greens have stuffed that. There'll be no inheritance tax. There will be, basically.
I think he means that there's going to be inheritance tax, yeah.
Yes, he's actually mistyped there. But that's obviously coming forward. We're talking about taxes on gains we haven't even had yet. I mean, it's just crazy what's going on with the government at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's look at, sorry, did you want to do some more comments or could we go to the next thing?
Yeah, let's go to the next thing.
All right, so the next segment is just briefly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Trump's put this out about Iran and oil, excuse me. And this is one of his truth statements. If you have a look at it, it's not a video, just throw that up there if you would. Alert, all purchase of Iranian oil or petrochemical products must stop now. Any country or person who buys any amount of oil or petrochemicals from Iran will be subject to immediately secondary sanctions. They will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America in any way, shape or form. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald Trump. I mean, this is who's calling the shots here. That's the amazing thing about this. But of course, who's buying Iranian oil is what you got to ask. Yeah. And guess who that is?
Who?
China.
Of course.
China's been importing Iranian oil. So that's really interesting in terms of the energy side of fight and where that's all going.
It's unbelievable.
I don't want to criticize Donald Trump. I'm glad that he won the election. I think that not just the United States, but the entire Western world, and by extension the whole world, is safer under his leadership than what it would have been had Kamala Harris won. And also, I think the Democrats just did an abysmal job. And, the gaslighting about how fantastic and sharp and vigorous and energetic Joe Biden was, but we could all see he wasn't, is something that they shouldn't be forgiven for anytime soon. But I do get a little bit apprehensive when Americans throw their weight around like that. Other countries that perhaps have a close relationship to Iran shouldn't then be told that they can't have that relationship with Iran if they want to do business with the United States. What about the other Middle Eastern countries and Gulf countries that have, that have proximity and geographical proximity to Iran that maybe share some of their values? So I think that can be a little bit dangerous. And certainly you don't want to escalate things too much with China.
Well, it's interesting. They've also done, the US has done a $3-point-something billion deal providing missiles to Saudi Arabia, UAE, United Arab Emirates. And so that's going to be interesting in terms of them securing their interests in the Middle East.
For sure. But I actually, I'm just going to say with Czech, I agree thoroughly on that. I want to use the term bullying, but it's, let's face it, it's just a little bit of pressure, simple as that. But America's always done this. To have you aligned with them, they tend to control your country financially and who you can deal with. So it's certainly not a new thing.
It's not, but that's what I'm saying. I just want to be consistent because I've always had that concern, and I think that is part of the reason why the US dollar, is being a little bit displaced the world's global reserve. It will remain there. I think it'll remain there for a long time to come. But like I said, last year and the year before, we can't have 30% of the world's economy under sanction. And if you are going to do that, it's inevitable that you're going to see things like the BRICS nations, etc., start to form alliances to say, okay, we want to get out of this system that isn't working for us and our population. So, again, I think it has to be careful, but I trust Trump's judgment on this for now. And if he fails, and if the things that he's trying to do don't work, well, then I'll reassess and say we got it wrong. But for right now, I think that he should have the chance to lead the United States and the Western world.
I think what you've got to keep in mind too, with any economic changes, it can take sometimes 6 months, 12 months before you start seeing the effects. It's like water trickling down the pipes and that sort of stuff. And I think that's going to be the big one as far as the US economy is concerned. But not only that, but the international effects that it has globally as well, and how much of the nations how they respond to what's these new economic policies and geopolitical situations are happening. Speaking of the Middle East, let's have a look at what DOGE has done. They've been digging around. This is courtesy of Fox News here, this footage here. This is a really fascinating piece. Guess what they found?
What did they find?
And thanks to President Trump, he's now signed 2 executive orders to start to reduce the number of agencies in the government, and the Institute of Peace was one of them, which is why our team went in to try and understand what was going on. And that's when we found all of the craziness, like the weapons in their armory. We found the payments to the Taliban.
Okay.
So
try to hide the evidence.
Right. So just a few hours after we got into their headquarters, we found that their chief accountant had actually deleted over 1 terabyte of accounting records from several years. So you'd have to ask the question, well, why would somebody do that? The DOGE team, fortunately, was able to recover that data with the help of a few great employees at the Institute of Peace. And I think the most troubling thing was they received $55 million a year from Congress, and any money that went unspent, instead of returning that to Congress, they would sweep it into a private bank account, which had no congressional oversight. And that's what they would use to fund things like events at their headquarters and the private jets. And so I think it's a great example because most Americans don't know what's going on at a lot of these smaller agencies. And this is, I think, the most extreme case of some of the wasteful spend that we're finding.
So the agencies are hiding money from you. They're sending it to the Taliban. They have loaded weapons in the department buildings.
At the Institute of Peace.
At the Institute of Peace.
Yes.
That's right.
So this is a cover-up when you guys roll in.
This one, yes, a cover-up. Yes.
It's a cover-up.
They did delete a vast amount of financial information. That's really a definition of a cover-up.
Isn't that illegal to delete evidence?
Yes.
Shred documents?
It is. It's certainly illegal to delete accounting records that that Congress would certainly want to know where the congressionally appropriated funds are going from taxpayers.
When you catch them going Hillary style on their computers, do you refer this to the Department of Justice?
In this case, we did refer the evidence in the accounting example to the FBI and DOJ, and we were proud to do that. So yes, we did.
There you go.
Before we respond to that specifically, was that young kid? Is that Big Balls?
That's fine.
I think it is. It's a difficult angle, but I think that's Big Balls, isn't it?
Yeah, you could probably catch those balls from any angle, but
Put it in context, Shaq, for those who don't know what you're talking about.
Oh well, for those that don't know, a lot of the DOGE staff are quite young. They're 19, 20, stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure that kid that you heard talking, I'm pretty sure his online handle was Big Balls, which is probably something he set up when he was 12. I mean, like we all set something up when we're 12, and then by the time we get to an adult, we're like going for our first job interview and say, what's your email address? Oh, it's bigballs@yahoo.com.au.
Oh, you've got to love it. Okay, we're making light because we're just trying to lighten the mood of the fact of let's cut the crap. The Americans were literally funding the people who are trying to kill their citizens and their soldiers. That's unbelievable. And if you wind the clock way back, let's go back to say, 2001, when they find out that there was, I believe it was a figure of, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, but as I remember, there was $8 billion that was actually put through to a little, a little building company, or a little person associated with a building company called Bin Laden, right? Okay, in the late 1990s, right? That went through, and obviously we know what happened on September 11, 2001. It's all about history repeating itself, right? Things just don't change until you get Trump in.
I think one of the most egregious things that Australians feel, and citizens of the United States feel, people in the UK feel, is the taxpayer dollars that are being spent on things which don't appear to be priorities to us. And I think that's what people have a real concern about. It's very interesting because, we, us three certainly are centre right. Probably Derek's probably a bit more on the right than I am, for example. But there's been a bit of a change in what centre right people talk about. If you hear centre right people talk today, and you compare it to 20 years ago, we talk about funding for healthcare. We talk about funding for education. We talk about why is it that people don't have enough to eat and things like that. These are concerns for the centre right. Before that used to kind of be, the right wing, conservative apparatus, as somebody like Paul Keating would refer to John Howard as, which was a real kind of get a job, be self-sufficient, and you'll be okay. Whereas now it's a conversation about actually we want to make sure that our tax dollars are being spent on the things that we all need. There's a lot of people today, we talk about climate change, and some people say it's a hoax, other people say it's not, but most people want the planet and our environment to be clean. If it is possible for us to create energy in an efficient way, most people support that, right? It's just that we don't think that what's being proposed sounds very good. When mining companies go in and cause a heap of environmental damage, if they're the ones that are making all the profits, they should be the ones that have to pay to rehabilitate that land. So you don't have something like what happened with Nauru, with their phosphorus mining. So, these are centre-right topics right now, and the left seems to have sold out to all those big corporations that in the past the right wing was accused of making deals with. So it's a very, very strange thing. But I think that's probably what people find the most egregious. On the scale of the universe, the $55 million a year or whatever was just mentioned there, for a country the size of the United States, or even for a country our size, $55 million, who cares, right? There's a bit of waste there, who cares? Forget about where it's going. The waste is something that doesn't make much of a difference to their overall economy. But I think what people find so objectionable is when you add up all of this money which is going out to all of these different countries that's not being accounted for, and meanwhile we've got people in our own countries that are struggling, that are suffering, people skipping meals, all that sort of stuff just to try and survive, or they're skipping meals to feed their pets, to feed their children, all of that sort of stuff. That's just not acceptable. And I don't think it's acceptable regardless of what political leanings you might have. And I think that is the predominant view that we share. That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the point I raised earlier, I mean, where does, with this money that the United States is recovering in the Ukraine-Russian conflict,
Yes.
and getting, this debt money they gave them for their conflict, they're getting rare earth minerals, the deal's being done. Where does that put all the other nations of the world, particularly taxpayers who are struggling to put food on their table, meet their rent, all that sort of stuff? And they're going, you've just given our wealth to some conflict that's not related to us. How are we going to recoup that?
That's been happening since the day dot, though.
There's not that accountability.
Yeah.
And I think this is an interesting one in terms of money going to the Taliban.
Sure.
Well, America's weapons ended up in the Taliban hands when they evacuated a few years ago under the Biden administration, and just left disgracefully, handing over all their military secrets as far as their equipment was concerned. Like, see ya, no attempt to bring it back.
That's right.
Just get out of there. And I think this is how, you can see the corruption, how far it's been going. Taxpayers' money funding their enemies.
Yeah.
Just put that in perspective, so that most people, a lot of people, I think, don't realise how much that weaponry is. We've got more weapons than Australia's got.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? They got more weapons than most countries. It's absurd.
So actually reverse engineer if they want to build more.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling that would happen. Just on that thing about foreign relationships. Of course, we all have to maintain foreign. We'll get away from the Taliban for a minute. Of course, we have to try and maintain good foreign relations, and we've got to try and do something, with poorer countries. I'd say, you trade with them and things like that. But it's a big difference between Australia and Australians that would race to New Zealand because they've had an earthquake or something, and we all race over there because they're our brothers and sisters and we have a very close bond. To Australia put a sanction on Russia during that conflict, and we have like 0.001% or something of our trade that happens with Russia, and the Bureau of Statistics said that this is statistically indistinguishable from zero. What was the point of that? Like, Australia's flexing its might with Russia. I mean, what was the point? So, I mean, again, I'm not saying that we should turn our back on these countries, but I think we have to, we should expect that our politicians will focus on what's the most important, and what's the most important is we, the people of this country.
Well, that's what politicians have lost sight of over a very long period. They do not serve the public anymore. They don't consider themselves public servants, and certainly don't consider themselves to be representatives of the people. If they do, my word, they're doing a very, very poor job of it.
Well, we're also starting to review who we give money to internationally. At least the Trump administration is leading that way. They've stopped their funding to the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum. Also, the next one that's on the target list here is the United Nations. Last year, they're going through a cash fall situation where they're saying they could run out of cash within months. The Economist has reported that last year the United Nations had a $200 million cash shortfall, despite spending only 90% of its planned budget. And they say this year is going to be much worse. Internal modelling suggests that the year-end cash deficit will, without cuts, blow out to $1.1 billion, leaving the United Nations without money to pay salaries, suppliers by September. They are going into sort of, no more hires as far as the United Nations is concerned. Most UN funding, such as for bodies providing humanitarian food or shelter, is voluntary, but the core functions are paid through mandatory dues. Linked to the size of their members' economies. So there's a whole huge shake-up going on that front as well. The world is changing very, very rapidly in how you relate to it. And I think a lot of these bodies have to be reviewed, because look at what DOGE is discovering internally. Well, who's going to do a review of the external bodies and why they're, what's going on there?
Can you imagine having a United Nations DOGE? But correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to the United Nations, they had was it called the League of Nations or something? There was some other group. These things do have to be reformed, because I think that eventually they just become so big and they just become so bloated. So these things do need to be reformed. I think the United Nations has served us well in the past, and then in recent times things have become very political, where if we get away from COVID, for example, who's made an international health recommendation that transgenderism be introduced to school curriculums around the Western world? Can you go away? This is a political issue. Let let countries work that out for themselves in their domestic policies. This should not be something the WHO steps in on.
Or who wanting treaties with nations, sovereign nations, that basically they can come in if there's a pandemic of some nature and we'll take over control here. Thank you very much. I mean, what do the citizens have to say? They haven't voted these organizations in
Where's the
whatsoever.
democracy we keep hearing so much about? Yeah.
But that's why I just don't understand what's happening in the United Kingdom, because you've got the country. Okay, I accept that the it would appear at the moment the majority of people would prefer to go back into the EU if they could, as opposed to what's happened. But I would say that's been because of domestic mismanagement. But here you've got the UK basically, under Keir Starmer's leadership, basically saying, well, okay, let's get back involved in all of these international bodies, which is really, in my opinion, ceding sovereignty in a way that the people of the United Kingdom clearly didn't want. That was one of the reasons they wanted out of the EU in the first place, was because they didn't want to have their domestic policies dictated by some, transnational supergroup.
Look, Shaq, the UK has fallen. I don't think it can be saved, to be frank with you. I really genuinely think as a nation, it holds no great value anymore. I mean, it's completely overrun with different immigration, which has changed the social culture. You speak to anybody who grew up there or has had any sort of life or relationship there, and no one wants to go back. Everyone's escaping it.
Not only that, but watch what happens to the Royals. I think the Royals right now how do you redeem this? How do you salvage the Royals at the moment? Do these Commonwealth nations really want them as head of state?
I agree. Just
that's becoming under big time review.
I've been saying that my entire life. But look, Charles appears, and I certainly don't wish this on the man, but I don't think he's going to be around that long. And then we'll have William and Kate, but. Yeah, I think that they've become less relevant. I think Harry's done a lot of damage. I think he should be stripped of his titles, personally. That's my view. But be that as it may, I think one of the mistakes Charles made is that he actually got very involved in politics in a way that his mother didn't. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why he did that.
His ego.
Maybe.
I really don't. Yeah. Gentlemen, we have to finish the show. We're completely over time, which is what we do every single week. Great to see you, Shaq, mate. It's been too long. So great to have you. Next week, we'll have you on the hot seat here in our studios, and we'll have a big catch-up about all sorts of things. But for now, thank you very much for being part of the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia.